There you are. Chapter 4, We Agnostics, page 44. Okay. This is my you can see I'm full of I'm like amped. I love this chapter. So we're going to talk a lot about God now. We're going to talk a lot about our prejudices. We just did the lay aside prayer. So this chapter talks about a couple of things. This chapter talks about where we find God. This chapter will talk about what is God, who is God, his character. This is going to talk to us about the atheist, the agnostic, and even the one who's coming here with a really, really heavy religious background. So we're going to cover a whole bunch of stuff here. And all we're asking for tonight is a truckload of open-mindedness and for you to say, maybe, just maybe, maybe. That's all. Bring maybe and open-mindedness to the table. All right, before we kick off, let's look at the word agnostic. This is without knowledge. So what this, for me, the description that someone gave me once, and it made beautiful, perfect sense. I knew and was aware of a God. I had a Christian God when I was a child. That was my faith. I'd experienced it, and then I'd experienced so much hurt and pain that I was convinced there was no God. In fact, I was convinced that whatever God there was had a really sick sense of humor and hated my guts. And even though I was so dedicated and so loyal as a child, despite being not popular at school, which was the most important thing to me, I followed a Christian path. And then all of a sudden, in 1 year, at the age of 15, I had pain after pain after pain. And I remember looking up the sky going, I'm done. I'm done with you. And I turned like 180 degrees. I turned my back completely and I walked another in a completely opposite direction. So I was an agnostic. I knew there was God. I'd had an experience, but I believed that that God wasn't going to work for me. I wasn't good enough. I didn't show up on the day that he handed out child of God name badges. The deal that he had to offer, I wasn't good enough. I wasn't going to get it. So I got the ticket when the pastor on Sunday said, if you've stolen, you're going to hell. I was like, oh, I've stolen, I've lied, I'm fine. I'm going to ride this hell train all the way. And I did. Gates of insanity and death. All right. So in the preceding chapters, you have learned something of alcoholism. We hope we have made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. Sorry, I've got a teenager who's baking, so you might hear a little bit of background noise. If, when you honestly want to, yeah, we're going to qualify the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic again, just to recap what we've gone through. If, when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, question one, or if, when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take, you're probably alcoholic. And guys, we only need a 50% pass rate to be an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. Do you have little control, or do you have little choice, or do you have both? Do you have the obsession and the allergy, or just the allergy and just the obsession? We just need 50% to get in here and grab a seat. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. Let's stop here. Let's flesh this. Let's unpack this paragraph a little bit. When I went to treatment, I remember while I was sitting in the little admin office off to the side, there was this pamphlet and it had 20 questions. Are you an alcoholic? Do you have a drug problem? And I answered these 20 questions while I waited for the lady to go and get my paperwork done and my medical insurance paperwork signed off and approved, etc. And I ticked off yes, yes, yes. And I got to question 19 and it was still yes. And I got to question 20 and I was like, oh, cool, I scored 100% on this test. And the bottom, the fine print, said if you answered yes to one or more of these questions, one or two of these questions, you probably have a problem. And I remember my heart sunk to my toes. I was like, oh my, I have got a problem. I'm screwed. I answered yes to all these questions. Anyway, the reason I tell you that story is we don't need those 20 questions. We need to answer 2 questions. If When drinking, you have little control. Yes. If when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely. Yes. Welcome to the club. Yeah. So I can't see Bill. Normally I can see him and then I know that he's going to jump in or he's got something to say. I just want to have a squiz and see where he's at. No, I'm going to continue on page 44. To one who feels he is an atheist or agnostic, welcome, welcome. We got place for everybody here. This highway is roomy and broad, not exclusive, completely inclusive. Such an experience seems impossible, but to continue as he is means disaster, especially if he is an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. To be doomed to an alcoholic death, step one, or to live on a spiritual basis, step two, are not always easy alternatives to face. Let's go look at what a spiritual basis looks like. The book describes it a few times. I just made one little page. Let's bounce on over. Page 25. Let's go look. Page 25. The second paragraph. The spiritual basis is, it says here, almost none of us like the self-searching, steps 4 to 5, the leveling of our pride, step 6 to 9, the confession of shortcomings, step 5, which the process requires for its successful consummation. That is living life on a spiritual basis. That's doing this work. It's taking the hand of someone armed with the facts and walking through these steps. All right, I'm going to mute. We've got quite a bit of background noise going on here. Bill, go.
Thank you, Nadia. Were you calling on me or did you want to find out if I was here? I want to say something. I told a couple of people before the meeting I had a revelatory experience. And I heard something the other night and I never heard it before, although I'm sure it's been said. On the title page, Alcoholics Anonymous, we always get into the promise, the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. I've heard so many people on this platform say that's the promise, but what I lost sight of was this is a story. They're telling me a story. And you get to chapter 4 and it says in the preceding chapters, the people who are reading the book have learned something. They've been educated. We've given you information. And now it segues to, from me reading a story from an outsider perspective, to few to whom this book will appeal, it says, can stay sober anything like 30 days. Some will be drunk the day they make the decision, some within a week. And I thought, well, wait a minute. Who is the book designed to appeal to? And then I went to the doctor's opinion, Nadia, because I know you like to play whack-a-mole and jump all around the book to get some confirmation. And this is what it says. We of Alcoholics Anonymous believe that the reader, it does not say the alcoholic, does it? It says the reader, because not everyone that's reading this book is alcoholic. Some people were gathering information. Some people may go to the library and say, I want a good storybook. They say, we've got one. It's called Alcoholics Anonymous, a story about how these people recovered from this illness. So they've educated us to this point on the illness. They haven't given me the diagnosis, but hear what they say. Hey, Billy boy, if you're reading this book and you're questioning whether you meet any of the description in the doctor's opinion or the preceding chapters, if when you honestly want to, that means, guess what? I'm not lying to no one, except myself, maybe, and I'm about to find out. If while drinking you have little control, or if while not drinking you can't wait to get started again, and you always get started again because abstinence is almost as unbearable as drunkenness, you are probably alcoholic. The reason I say that is because of the time we get to how it works, my mind is so steeped in this information that I instinctively know I'm one of them. But if I'm not careful, I forget that in chapter 5, we're still reading a story. And I talked to Allie before the meeting. If the third pertinent idea is that I be convinced that God could and would, if he were sought, before I get to the steps, I may never take the steps. I may die waiting to be convinced because I forget that they're telling me the reason they're convinced is something happened to them as a result of the next 2 chapters in the book. I remember a sponsor used to say to me, okay, A, B, and C. God could and would if he were sought. And I said, wonderful. He said, are you convinced? I said, I'm convinced I'm an alcoholic and I've come to believe that something can help me, but I'm not so sure that it will. So by the very nature, if that's a condition for me to move forward, I can never move forward. But if you're saying to me, Bill Swan, they wrote what they did, this is a history storybook, read on. Here are the steps we took, which brought about the convincing. And I'm sitting there pre-step 3, drinking myself to death because I'm not quite sure God could and would. So I've got to watch and see the way this book is talking to me, because here's the real deal. If my mother, as a non-alcoholic, was reading this book, I'm quite certain when she got to the end, she'd say, oh my God, isn't that great? These people did this work, they contacted the power and he solved their problem. Hallelujah. And what I read it as is knowing I'm an alcoholic and wondering why I'm not convinced of the 3 pertinent ideas before I utter the prayer. It's because that was not the intent of this book. It was a love story. And if I happen to meet the diagnosis and doctor opinion, if my experience was anything like Bill or the other people in chapter 2 or 3, if I found myself handicapped by obstinacy, prejudice, worship, or pride, and I followed the instructions, something could happen. I don't know if I don't follow the instructions. That's why they say Alcoholics Anonymous, until I start making amends, which is where I enter a new realm, is nothing but theoretical. In fact, the big book is no more than an inspirational book than the Bible or How to Win Friends and Influence People. But I don't know that if I don't understand that the book was not necessarily designed by an alcoholic who knew the diagnosis, but by someone who was looking for information. And if the shoe fit and I was willing to go to the shoe store and try it on, I might be able to walk out of the shoe store with my new shoes and tell people how I got to the ball with my shiny slippers.
Bill's talking, and we're about to get there. He's talking about if lack of power is your problem, this book is going to help you connect to the power of God. That's what this is about. Thank you.
You know, you said something at first I was going to take issue, and I'm glad I didn't. Like you said, this chapter is going to tell you where God is to be found. The rest of the chapters are going to tell us how to find it.
Yeah. Oh man, if you're with us, if you're back in, or if you're here for the first time, stick around, stick with us, and just hear, especially this chapter. And I just want to stop here now, because I asked you guys, I said, let's come in tonight with an open mind, and we're going to lay aside some prejudice, and we're going to use the word maybe. So we've made a couple of statements here. It says, if you're an alcoholic, or we're going to go on to see that you're powerless. If that's the case, you may be suffering, I am suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. So let's just stop, and as a group, quietly just check ourselves. What prejudice have I got against that? Spiritual experience? Does that mean I have to like glow like I've got a halo around me? Does that mean I have to go to Tibet? Does that mean I've got to start speaking in a language that nobody can decipher? What is it? Like, what is it? No, I don't know. Let's just check those prejudices. Just check them. We don't need any answers right now. And let's look at another statement here. If you're an alcoholic of the hopeless variety, we've got 2 alternatives: to be doomed to an alcoholic death, or live on a spiritual basis. And I know there's a couple of, I was like, what does an alcoholic death look like? Because honestly, I don't want a spiritual basis. It sounds like too much work. It sounds like I've got to be somewhere on a Sunday, or I'm going to have to go stand on a street corner and put my hands on people and do like weird, I don't know, like spiritual basis. That just doesn't sound like a lot of fun. An alcoholic death, however, does, like, how bad is that really, guys? Like, is it a day or two? Does it drag on? But let's go see. The book makes a lot of references about alcoholic death. I've pinpointed 3 pages. Let's go check them out. Page 30. This is a description of an alcoholic death, the bitter ends. Let's go see what it says. 30. Right at the end of that first paragraph, it says, many pursue it, which is the obsession that we can drink or use or lust or gamble like normal people. Many of us will pursue that to the gates of insanity or death. Okay, those are our options. Here's another one, page 137. Please do not look at this as bad taste. This is the reality. For some of those who are new in, this is the reality. Page 137, second paragraph. In the middle of the paragraph, 4 days before he had hanged himself in his woodshed. And the third reference that I want to highlight for us tonight is page 152. First paragraph, halfway through that paragraph. This is what bitter ends, alcoholic death looks like. He cannot picture life without alcohol. Someday, he will be unable to imagine life either with alcohol or without it. Can't live with alcohol, can't live without alcohol. Man, that's a special kind of hell. Then he will know loneliness such as few do. He will be at the jumping off point and he will wish for the end. And if you've had a life like me and you wake up in the mornings and you've tried your damnness and you're still around, that's limbo, man. That's insane. Okay, so those are our options. Either we go on to the bitter ends, alcoholic death, or we accept spiritual help. Let's check. Perhaps it is going to be that way with you. Perhaps you're going to struggle with this choice. Perhaps you have been struggling with this choice. Perhaps, like me and Bill, you've done that for a couple of decades. But cheer up. Something like half of us thought we were atheists. What is atheist, guys? An atheist means that you only have your human power to turn to for all life's troubles, all your heartache, all your loss, all your desires. If you're an atheist, the only power that you have is a human power to base all of that on, okay? To get all of that. You've told your mind, you've instructed your mind that that's how you're going to get what you need. And your reliance is on humans, on human power. Or agnostic, very quick description. What is an agnostic? They know there's a God, but he don't exist for me. That answer, I'm not going to get that luxury. I ain't going to get tapped into that. Our experience shows that you need not be disconcerted. So here's a little caveat. Here's a little bit of fine print. If you take the hand of someone who's done this work and you vigorously follow it, okay, you follow the clear-cut instructions, I guarantee you that you're going to get collected to a power greater than yourself. So when you're an agnostic, it's going to be a power that you thought you were never allowed any access to. And if you're an atheist, you're going to see it's a power beyond human capabilities. That seems pretty exciting, doesn't it? Bill, go.
I just find it interesting. It's the second time that it's popped out. To one who feels he is an atheist, in the next chapter, the next paragraph talks about those who thought they were an atheist. It does not diagnose them as the condition they think or feel they are. And if this chapter is true, that if deep down in every man, woman, and child is the DNA of God, me to say there is no God or I don't believe or I'm confused does not change the nature. By the very description, there's no such thing as an atheist. It's just someone who's mentally ill that's trying to disprove the creation by the creator. And if we're all wrong and they get to be right, we are the disillusioned ones. But if 10 people tell you you got a tail, turn around and look, you may be a donkey.
Speaking of a donkey, Mark Houston uses the donkey story where he says, and I might be misquoting, and maybe it's not Mark Houston, it doesn't matter. I just remember listening to one of his shares. And if you haven't listened to a Mark Houston share, again, another thing I'm going to beg you to do is spend some time doing that. He talks about religion and different modes of spirituality all being donkeys, and we all get on our own little donkey. Mine's a gray donkey with a white ear, Bill's is a brown donkey, and we're all going up this hill, this mountain. My donkey's a little slower, Bill's donkey's a lot hungry, so he stops to eat a lot. Nonetheless, we all travel up this mountain on our own donkey. But then there's a part of that mountain that's too steep, too high, too narrow. And all of us have got to get off our donkeys and walk up that path together, ultimately. Now, I don't know if I told that story right. Maybe Bill can jump in and just like zhuzh it up for me a little bit.
What it says is we don't make fun of the other person's donkey. But as human beings, because of our prejudice, because of our agnosticism, and most significantly for the alcoholic, because of my need to be right, even if it kills me, I got to poke fun of your donkey because I don't want to look at the fact that mine might be a zebra that I call a donkey. Mine might be a horse. Mine might be a sheep. And I'm telling everyone it's a donkey. And they're telling me it's not. I'm going to tell you what, I just had another one of those revelation experiences when we get to the next chapter that really ties this all together and gives credence to the fact of how self-deceived we are to try and A, be convinced or convinced ourselves that there is no God, A, theism, or B, I don't know. I ain't had enough proof without Gnostics, without knowledge. When I was made in the beginning flawless, and if I didn't get up in my head, which is where I morally and philosophically am inclined to look for the power, the book tells me the needed power's not there. It doesn't say I don't have it. What it's telling me is I'm going to look for it in the wrong place. My mind, and as Mark Houston, since you brought him up, said, you cannot experience God in your mind. You must be out of your mind to experience the power because he doesn't live there. Quit looking in the wrong place, Swanee boy.
And the furthest, the longest distance for an alcoholic to travel is from his mind to its heart. And we hope we can tap into that space tonight. And like Bill said, we go on to read on page 44, right at the bottom. If a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, remember Fred, upstanding guy, had a bit of shame. Like if that stuff was enough to keep him out of the salons and the bars, then, that'd be the answer, but it wasn't. Fred had nothing wrong. There was nothing going wrong in that man's life. And he had a huge bout of shame. He really had a good understanding of the disease. He thought that was enough. It was not. Excuse me, I've got a frog tonight. Many of us would have recovered long ago. Recovered, there's a beautiful promise again. But we found that such codes and philosophies, self-help books, I mean, I've got many. We moved recently and I've just found that box. I don't know how that box I don't even know how it's still with me after being in AA for a couple of 24 hours. I thought I chucked it long ago, but anyway, I have to laugh when I see them. But we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us. Oh no. No matter how much we tried, we could wish to be moral. We could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could will these things with all our might, but the needed power wasn't there. Our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed utterly. So let's stop. Let's change the statement. Is this your experience? Have you tried everything known to mankind to stop? Moving to different continents, germ contracts, learning a new language, maybe moving towns, I don't know, changing friends, drinking wine on Wednesdays, not drinking red wine in winter. I don't know. What if you think of the things you've tried? We are beyond human aid. Here's it. Here's the power. This is the power packed paragraph. Lack of power. Small letter P. That was our dilemma. When I came into these rooms, I thought drinking was my problem. I thought that I drank too much. I didn't drink the right stuff. I couldn't find the right bag of cocaine. I had the wrong dealer. It was always, maybe if I bought the stuff in October because in the big ship, I don't know. There was a formula to getting it right. I tried everything and nothing worked because I couldn't get it right. I couldn't drink like other people. I couldn't use like other people. I couldn't get that buzz that I did the first time that I used. Tried everything. My dilemma wasn't how to use or how to drink or how not to drink or how not to use. Lack of power. That was my problem. But you can tell me about what my problem is a little further on down the line again. You're going to reveal something else to me. Two other things. That selfishness and self-centeredness is also my problem. We had to find a power by which we could live, not just hanging on by our knuckles. And it had to be a power greater than ourselves. And that's what we do here. If you're going to grab a sponsor or someone armed with the facts, all they're doing is they're just brokering your relationship to the power of God. That little lazy finger of yours, that's just like floppy and all arrogant, like I know everything and I don't need your help and I've already got all the answers. All we do is we just straighten that finger and we just connect you to the power of God. All right, okay, obviously I've got a problem. I am powerless. I've tried everything to stop. I've tried everything not to drink. I've tried everything to use properly and not end up the way I do, with children abandoned and cars wrecked and marriages wrecked. Obviously, I go on to read on page 45, second paragraph. Obviously, but where and how do we find this power? Well, that's exactly what this book is all about. Its main object is to help you find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. And for some of those who are sitting in this room, who've been around for many 24 hours and you can't understand why you're at the jumping off point, you've stopped drinking, you're abstinent, you haven't had a drug in your system for years, decades. There's a new problem. Can't make money, your relationships are dismal. I don't know. There's a power here that can help solve any problem here, guys. Any problem, your problem. Bill, go ahead.
And it's interesting that they use the word problem singular, as if all we have is one problem. And it's not drinking, incidentally. We have one problem. We're blocked from the power. But interesting, I just noticed this. And I'm glad that you read it, and I'm kind of reading or thinking along. You said this: we had to find a power by which we could live. And then my mind went to in the fourth step where it says, if we were to live, we must be rid of this anger. We must be rid of these things. So that's the second time they've given us a contingency. If you were to live, you had to find a power because you lack the power to stop from killing yourself. And if we were to live, we had to be free of this anger. The grouch and the brainstorm weren't for us. This was our course to enable us to find out not only where and how we are blocked, but who's responsible for removing the blockage. I can't get rid of self with self. It tells us we had to have God's help. And if resentment is the first evidence or manifestation of this thing called self, and I can't get rid of it on my own, guess what? I have to have God's help. I lack the power. And if I'm to live, I am going to have to find a power to give me the power of the power to do that, because I don't have it in and of myself, at least not where I'm looking at it. You know, my favorite new line now, just if you're looking for God, put down the telescope and pick up a pen.
Yeah, we put pen to paper. The instructions, that's it. Yeah, we're going to have another power night tonight. Power. We're here to talk about power. All right. So that means we have written a book which we believe to be spiritual as well as moral. So when you go to the Big Book Dictionary, what he's talking about here is as well as honest. This book is honest. There's an honest recollection here of their experience, how they became sober, what they did to keep that sobriety, and what they did not only to keep that sobriety, but to live happy, joyous, and free. I've heard Bill on every single one of these say this little statement. Yes, when he put down the drink, it was that was one problem out the way. But the problem is he couldn't stand being sober. Couldn't stand it. We couldn't stand being in our skins. And guys, we get a sweet deal in here. We get to live sober and happy, joyous, and free.
And incidentally, Nadja, since you brought that up, you'll hear in the room sometimes, and it's a legitimate question. We read it and we laugh or scoff or joke about it. You say to be doomed to an alcoholic death or live on a spiritual basis are not easy alternatives. And we laugh and say, tell any normal person this or that, and they will always choose the right answer. What they don't explain is the irony or the joke is not because we're insane to not choose the right answer. It's because, as my sponsor pointed out, both alternatives look as disastrous as the other, one or the other. What's the difference whether I'm stuck with abstinence, which I can't stand, or drunkenness and all its consequences, which I can't afford? Both of those look like very perilous alternatives. So it's not an insane, well, what's an alcoholic death really look like? I know what abstinence looks like. That's the problem. So they're telling us we have a solution for the condition called abstinence. It's a spiritual awakening which overrides or trumps the condition that's not real, but that you are convinced is real. Problem centers in the mind. Here's the solution.
And the problem is about that solution is that there's so much bristling with antagonism. When I come into this room and you tell me, because you only use higher power a little bit in the beginning, and then all of a sudden it switches over to God, and I'm just like, no, no, not God, please, just not God, like Paul said. Like that is disastrous that that's going to be my option. And my
I
whole
guarantee
body
you,
has a reaction.
when they wrote this and they say be of good cheer, about half of us were originally that type. I doubt that. I doubt that those numbers were accurate. And here's why I say that. It looks like this chapter is written to the unknowing or to the unbelieving. And I believe the majority of us that benefit from this chapter are the ones who think we know for sure. The prejudiced, the obstinate, the misled, the confused. Why would I bristle with antagonism? If you tell me something that is true in and of itself, which is that I'm made in the image and likeness of God, because I've got a concept of God that just is so distasteful, I would rather deny his existence or drink myself to death than go back to him sending me to a place I don't want to go because I'm not behaving the way someone told me I needed to behave. This chapter may be just as opposite of the rest, not addressed to the agnostic at all. In fact, The people who were convinced you had no persuasion of any type of religious leaning, they had the most profound spiritual awakenings because they had no fixed ideas or prejudice. I was handicapped by what I was taught, not by what I lacked. I told you guys I got baptized so many times one year they thought I was trying out for the swim team. Never stopped me from smoking or drinking with the apostles. That wasn't my problem. The spirit of the law was killed by the letter of the law. That's what this chapter is about.
So there's actually a real life story about what Bill's just explained. When in Bill's story, right at the beginning of the book, which we started 15 years ago, I think, Bill. Right in the beginning of the book, there's Bill's story, and Eddie comes to Bill. Okay, it's at the end of a bleak November. The phone rings. Bill is looking for bathtubs. He's looking for gin and vodka that he's hidden, whatever, alcohol that he's hidden around the house. He's been sent out of towns to go die. He's at home to die, okay? And the phone rings, Ebby rings, it is him, he's on his way, and Bill is so excited. He has a friend who's going to bring him some relief, okay? He opens the door, and we all know there's Ebby, a miracle, standing in front of him, barely resembling his old self, and Bill knows that it's him, but he doesn't know that it's him because he looks different. He's not shouting at him, going, I got religion. You got to give your life to God. Come on, come with me. None of that. He just stands at the door. I don't know this. I wasn't there that day, but the way that it's described, the way Bill writes it, Ebby's standing at the front door and his whole deportment shouts that he has a solution. His eyes are twinkling. His skin's not wrinkly and gray. And while he's talking, Bill's mind snaps shut. That prejudice just brings up that moat, it brings up those walls, and it's just like, no, this is not for me. But while he's talking, he drops the ball again, and he's like, but what I see, doubting Thomas sticking his finger in the holes of the hands, he's like, what I see, I can see there's a miracle, but no, I don't want the solution. I don't want that. That's not for me. And it's spoken about beautifully in Bill's story. All right, back page 5045. So, as you've gathered, it means that we are going to talk about God. So, here's a little trick that I use when I speak to newcomers and I see them looking at that word and I can just see they're like, no. And I'm like desperate to hold onto their hands because they can't let go of my hand. And I say to them, just remember to type monolithic typing. When they printed this book, the word higher power, it cost a lot more than to print the word God, G-O-D, just 3 little letters. So that's what they did. They replaced the word higher power with the word God. But I'm telling you now, if you've got any doubt about what this program's about, I ask you to rip out all the pages that have the word God in and see what's left. Here, difficulty arises with agnostics. Many times we talk to a new man and watch his hope rise as we discuss his alcoholic problems and explain our fellowship. Yeah, we drank the way you did. Oh, yeah, I thought just the way you guys did. And we're like, there's that camaraderie. Oh, these guys understand me. And then they see the fellowship, the way everyone's hugging each other and showing each other, bringing coffee and clapping hands and celebrating birthdays. But his face falls when we speak to him of spiritual matters, especially when we mention God. For we have reopened a subject which our man thought he had neatly evaded or entirely ignored. If we go on over to page 93, the first paragraph. Here is some instructions. When you see your man's face fall, when you tell him that you drank and he goes, yep, I drank like that. And the way you thought, yep, I thought like that too. Yes, I've lost. Okay. So we're all on the same page. And this is the fellowship and these are the meetings and this is what, and now here's the solution. God, I need you to say, maybe, just maybe this could be the answer, right? Now you see their face fall. So for you guys that are sponsoring, here's some really practical solutions. Let him ask you that question. So you're going to tell him how you got well. Tell him exactly what happened to you. Don't mess about with the spiritual side of this, okay? Stress the spiritual feature freely. If the man be agnostic or atheist, make it emphatic that he does not have to agree with your conception of God. He can choose any conception he likes, provided it makes sense to him. The main thing is that he be willing to believe in a power greater than himself and to live by spiritual principles, because that's where the power lies. You and I, for me, definitely for the 3 decades of alcoholism that I had, I don't think I ever told the truth. Not on an employment contract, not on a medical insurance paper, not on an insurance claim. I don't think I ever, in my 30 years, did I ever tell the truth about anything. And it started at a young age. People had asked me where I was from when we moved to new schools, and I was always from a different town. Or my parents were circus actors. I mean, they were going to find that stuff out soon. I just could not tell the truth. So there you are. There's some really nice practical application when you're dealing with someone whose face falls when you visit the subject of God. We know how he feels. You know how he feels. You know how you felt when you came in and you realized God was the solution, that this was a spiritual program of action. You knew when your sponsor told you pray every morning, meditate, you were like, oh man, really? Really? Is that what I got to do? But I mean, we came in here with the desperation of a drowning man and woman, right? We've shared his honest doubt and prejudice. Speak to them about your honest doubt and prejudice. Speak to them about your childhood religion or your childhood faith, if you had that. And speak to them about when you turned your back on it. And speak to them honestly and frankly about it. To others, the word God brought up a particular idea of him with which someone had tried to impress them during childhood. Perhaps we rejected this particular conception because it seemed inadequate. With that rejection, we imagined we had abandoned the God idea entirely. We were bothered with the thought that faith and dependence upon a power beyond ourselves was somewhat weak, even cowardly. We looked upon this world of warring individuals, warring theological systems, and inexplicable calamity with deep skepticism. We looked askance at many individuals who claimed to be godly. How could a supreme being have anything to do with it all? I'm going to stop just there. So one of the step work questions or step work exercises when we're doing steps, and like Bill said, you want to find God, pick up a pen. That's what a lot of this is written work, okay? So for those who are looking for some tips and exercises for step work, when you're going through We Agnostics with your sponsee, get them to write down all the spiritual terms in this chapter that have got capital letters. And we've just hit the first one, supreme being. Write it down and get them to just next to it, just what is that? Maybe get the dictionary explanation of supreme, the dictionary explanation of being, or their own conception. What does that mean? What does it look like? And get them to identify all the spiritual terms in this chapter and give them a little description. They are guaranteed to have an experience, guaranteed to have an experience with that exercise.
Oh, it says in there, let me read it verbatim. To others, the word, and then in quotation marks is God. It didn't say to others, God brought up a particular idea. The word God brought up the idea. Sandy Beach does a great talk on that, since we're giving out information and quoting other celebrities that have since passed. It was the word God. It wasn't God. And then isn't it interesting how they ask the question to give me some freedom to question something else? And who could comprehend this supreme being? In other words, when you tell me you know who for sure who God is and it doesn't fit the piece of the puzzle inside of me that only the key of God can fit, it's going to come. Well, wait a minute. How do you know? Did you ever see? No, but I studied them, and that's my job. I'm the head of this establishment, and we know. And it's like all of a sudden, what they're saying is, as Kurt says, I was trying to believe something I couldn't believe. And when I went to my sponsor and had that confusion about this God that I was taught about, because I didn't want to blaspheme and go to hell if I investigated or stepped outside of the conviction, I said, Larry, what do I do? He said, well, I believe that first. I said, which one? He said, I don't know. He said, I think that first rule they laid down a long time ago was, I am the Lord your God. He said, that kind of sounds like God as you understand me, doesn't it? I said, yeah. I didn't realize till 20 years later there was a second part to that. If Joseph O were here, he would tell you the Hebrew version. But there was a separate part that says, thou shalt have no other gods. And I think what happens is by me trying to adopt your God as my own, your understanding, God, the God that brought you out of Egypt or bondage or alcoholism, is it might not fit the narrative of the God that's designed me. And I had a little revelatory experience when I thought about my mother and her 4 children. We are all different. We don't always do what she wants. In fact, if anyone was the black sheep of the family, it was moi. She never stopped loving me, visited me in jail, or rewriting me back. She didn't have to do any of those things with my brother or 2 sisters. But my mother never stopped loving any of us the same, because our behavior, our belief, our refusal or rebuttal of what she wanted from us never changed her nature. And when someone tells you if you're human, and I can't help but to be human, that's all I can ever hope to be. If you're human and you make mistakes, there's going to be a punishment that you can't imagine. And here's all the ways to try and get rid of the punishment before you die in a state of punishment, because there's going to be weeping, gnashing, and burning. And I rather say, I don't like that idea. That's a scary thought. I'll profess belief in that because I don't want to burn, weep, or gnash. But I know I'm going no matter what, because it's so ingrained. And lastly, I'll say this, Nadia. How many Superman sequels have they made? And I'll go there and believe that Clark Kent can go into a phone booth, fly, and reverse the orbit of the Earth. But I can't believe that behind all this is a creative intelligence that placed everything in order. And all I have to do at the turning point is turn, because I'm going the wrong way. And it looks like he's making heavy terms. The only one who's making heavy terms here is little old Billy, because he wants to do what he wants to do when he wants to do it, not considering the consequences, even though there are some, and then getting mad when the laws of nature caused me to get caught in the laws of nature. Then I want to be offended by God because he didn't do things the way I wanted to. The hell with the other 8 billion people on the planet. Aren't I special? Yes, you are. Special bus. Get on the bus, special boy.
Sounds to me like a good dose of self will run riot. Page 46, Supreme Being. Let's go see what it goes on to say. And who could comprehend the Supreme Being anyhow? Yet, in moments, change the them and the theys, and change it to I, myself. Change this chapter to work for yourself. I'm gonna read it in first person. Yet in other moments, I find myself thinking, when enchanted by a starlit night, who then made all of this? There was a feeling of awe and wonder, but it was soon fleeting and lost. You know, those moments where we step outside and all of a sudden it's just this expanse of stars and we're like, wow, just comes on suddenly, right? And then we start pondering and then it's like, oh, but if there is something big out there, that means I've got to live the right life. No. And then our mind snaps shut, okay? I know that's me. That's me. Worldly things get in the way. Where else does, okay, so I'm going to keep referring a lot to Bill tonight because there's some really real life, wow, my teenager's been cooking, baking. I got some apple pie coming my way. Page 12. Thank you. Page 12. Let's go look. Right at the bottom, while Ebby is talking, and Bill is coming in and out of consciousness because he's going back to his prejudice, and then he's coming into the state of miraculous wonder of his friend, and then back into prejudice and back into. So it says here, the real significance of my experience in the cathedral, because remember, he went to the Winchester Cathedral just to find some solace, just to find some quiet. He knew to go there. He was an atheist. He knew to go there. And he was much moved. Remember, guys, he was much moved because there was a presence of God there. The Spirit was there. For a brief moment, I had needed and wanted God. There'd been a humbling willingness to have him with me, and he came. Just that willingness to have him, and he comes. But soon the sense of his presence was blotted out by worldly clamors, all those things that grab for our attention. The new car, the hot new guy, the house, all of this, and then it's blotted out, it's gone. And that's what happens. We're standing there in awe, and then all of a sudden I'm wondering if I could get a house with a big enough window so that I could see this all the time. How am I going to get that house? I'm going to have to sell more houses, and then it's gone. That feeling of awe and just gone. Yet we of agnostic temperament have had these sorts of, yes, we have had these sorts of experiences. But let us make haste to reassure you. Here's 4 steps, 4 instructions that we're going to ask you what to do to start getting to this place of maybe, just maybe, there could be something out there or in there. Actually, we're going to find out none of God is. We found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice, step 1, that's one action, that's the first action. Lay aside prejudice. What is prejudice? All our old ideas, our beliefs, the things that we've taught ourselves. Can we put that aside? Because remember on page 58 in how it works, it says some of us tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was no, nothing, nada, zip, zilch, nothing. So we're asking you to cast the lay aside, just lay them aside. Just when they start popping up, to say, shh, 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 I'm trying to learn something new. I don't know. So let's hear what Nadia and Bulla are going to say. Let's hear. Lay aside prejudice. Express a willingness, just a willingness, maybe. Remember, I said, let's use the word maybe to believe in a power greater than ourselves. Guess what happens? We commence to get results, even though it was impossible for us to define or comprehend the word power. All you got to do is just lay aside some prejudice and bring some willingness to the table. What are the 3 things that we need to bring to this process? And God will provide the rest. Let's go look. It's on spiritual experience, page 568. Some of us need a refresher course, and some of us need to remind our newcomers, the new man that we're working with. Page 568, the 3rd paragraph. Willingness, honesty, open-mindedness. These things are indispensable. I cannot give them to you. You got to bring them to the table. And tonight we're asking for willingness, we're asking for open-mindedness, and we're asking for big doses of these things. All right, we're back on page 46, 3rd paragraph. Much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another's conception of God. Thank heavens, because the lady that sponsored me right in the beginning was going to church every Sunday, and I was definitely not up for none of that. I was definitely not up for none of that, I'll tell you. And when there's later on in the book, there is an instruction to be quick. My quick took 3 years. But I tell you, it's put my recovery on steroids. Anyway, much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another's conception of God. Our own conception, however inadequate, was sufficient to make the approach and to effect contact with him.
But probably, just in the interest of time, we may need to start on that paragraph next week because it's a big one that needs a lot of discussion. And we're not gonna get to it now because we haven't got to hear from Texas yet, and I got to hear from her. She's either gonna fail me or say, keep on keeping on, Billy boy.
You're going to stop the recording. I love that. Thanks, Bill.